Thank you so much, by the way. Hi, my name is Allison Albelda. I'm a freshman at Northwestern. I'm also a reporter for the Daily Northwestern, but I'm not here on behalf of the Daily Northwestern. But my editor's up there, so he can also write stuff down as I'm talking to you. Okay, cool. So basically, last week Northwestern had this concert with Lil Uzi Vert. I don't know if you know who that is. He's like the "All My Friends Are Dead." Going through my head, something, all my friends are dead. Anyway, he uses the N-word profusely, a ton, and there was an email sent out to students who went to this concert saying, you don't have a right to use this word, which I 100% agree with. As a white person, I don't have any right. I haven't, until reparations are paid, until there's some sort of giving back, there's no right. But what do you say I don't know what to do when I hear my friends using this word in a song. I don't know what to do when it's all the time.
Well, I don't want to get into what people sing in their showers. If you want to sing the whole DMX song in your shower or whatever that dude's name, it's fine. I think people should understand the reasoning for why, and this is divisive with even in the black community. Everybody doesn't agree with this. I'm sorry, I'm going to say the word, because I think, in the conversation, if you had used the word nigger right just now, I would have understood what you meant, and I wouldn't have taken offense within the context of the question. I understand why you did that. Communities in general of people, well, let's start even more basic than that. Words don't have meaning without context, okay? My wife refers to me as honey. That's accepted and okay between us. If we were walking down the street together and a strange woman referred to me as honey, that wouldn't be acceptable. The understanding is I have some sort of relationship with my wife. Hopefully I have no relationship with this strange woman. When I was young and I used to go see my family in Philadelphia where my dad was from, they will all call him Billy. His name is William Paul Coates. No one in Baltimore called him Billy. And had I referred to my father as Billy, that probably would have been a problem. That's because the relationship between myself and my dad is not the same as the relationship between my dad and his mother and his sisters who he grew up with, right? We understand that. It's the same thing with words within the African American community or within any community. My wife, with her girlfriends, will use the word bitch. I do not join in. I don't, say, hey, I don't do that. I don't do that. And perhaps more importantly, I don't have a desire to do it. You understand? A while ago, Dan Savage was going to have this show that he was going to call Hey Faggot. I'm not going to yell faggot at Dan Savage. That's not my relationship with the LGBT community, and I understand that, and I'm okay with that. I don't have a desire to, yell out the word, faggot. I just don't have that. The question one must ask, if that's accepted and normal for groups of people, we understand that, it's normal, actually, for groups to use words that are derogatory in an ironic fashion. Why is there so much hand-wringing when black people do it? Black people are basically, however you feel about it, they're not outside of the normal rules and laws for humanity. I had a good friend who used to have this cabin in upstate New York, which he referred to as the white trash cabin. He was white. I would never refer to that cabin. I would never tell him I'm coming to your white trash cabin. I just wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? I think you understand why I wouldn't do it. The question one must ask is why so many white people have difficulty extending things that are basic laws, of how human beings interact to black people. And I think I know why. When you're white in this country, you're taught that everything belongs to you. You think you have a right to everything. You have a right to go where you, and you're conditioned this way. It's not, because your hair is a texture or your skin is light. It's the fact that the laws and the culture tell you this. You have a right to go where you want to go, do what you want to do, be however, and people just got to accommodate themselves to you. So here comes this word that, you feel like you invented. And now somebody will tell you how to use the word that you invented. You know, why can't I use it? Everyone else gets to use it. You know what? That's racism that I don't get to use it. You know, that's racist against me. You know, I have to inconvenience myself and hear this song and I can't sing along? How come I can't sing along? You know what I mean? And I think, you know, for white people, I think the experience of being a hip-hop fan and not being able to use the word nigga is actually very, very insightful. It will give you just a little peek into the world of what it means to be black. Because because to be black is to walk through the world and watch people doing things that you cannot do, that you can't join in and do, you know? And so I think there's actually a lot to be learned from refraining.
Ta-Nehisi. Just a reminder, we're going to favor students, so I'm very sorry if those of you who are probably over about 25, we're probably going to walk right by you, so please just take it the right way. And please, if you could, just out of courtesy, don't keep your hands up while he's talking and we're answering questions. So this gentleman, who I think is 24 and a half.
Something like that. Hi. Hi, Ta-Nehisi. My name is Khalil, Howard University. What's up?
All right.
I just want to say I appreciate you. It's good to see somebody who went through the same struggle, you know, dealing with Howard and learning from the Mecca, to see somebody like you make it, in a sense. So I just want to say thank you for that. I'm currently a student at Loyola Chicago School of Law, and thank you. Watching you interact and going you on your tours and stuff like that, I constantly find myself on a smaller scale wondering this, and I've never found the question, so I'm hoping maybe you can articulate it. Going through what you're going through, you talk about, earlier you said you feel like you're representing. I'm the only black male in my section, so I feel the same. How do you don't seem mad. How are you not angry? No, that's a serious question. How are you not?
You should read some of my reviews.
But do you have any tips?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I write. I funnel it all into the book, and that's probably why the reviews look the way they look. But the rage is in the book, and I think, you know, rage is actually an important feeling. People try to make black people ashamed for being angry, you know, as though there's something wrong with being angry. Anger is a human emotion. It is normal to be, it's quite a bit to be angry about. You know, when somebody has robbed you and you are in a community in which everyone around you has been robbed and the robbery is ancestral, you might be a little angry. You know, I funnel that into my work. You know, I have moments all the time, you know, when I'm working on a story, and I'm working on one right now. And I just, you know, had these moments where, you know, and I'll explain it, you know, maybe, you know, next year. I'll come back, you know, after this is out. But when I was doing the case for reparations, and let me talk about something that happened in the past. When I was doing the case for reparations, there's a gentleman who leads that story by the name of Clive Ross. And when I walked into that dude's house on the west side, and he told me about how they robbed him in Mississippi by law, the law was robbery, it was a kleptocracy, and how he came to Chicago and he thought he was free and they robbed him again. Mr. Ross was, I think, 91, 92 years old. I was pissed. And the thing I was pissed, you know, I remember walking out, you know, into, you know, the streets of Lawndale, and I was so angry, not just that he'd been robbed, but that people acting like Lawndale was a mystery. And they couldn't figure out why Lawndale was the way it was. You know why Lawndale is the way it is. You did it. You know full well what happened here. I take that and I just pour it into the writing. I just pour it right in. You know, I pour all of that passion and all of that rage and all of that anger and, you know, all of those, you know, quote unquote negative emotions. I just pour it right into the literature.
Ta-Nehisi, to your left, over on the side.
Hi, my name is Ananya. I'm a sophomore here at ETHS. And so Evanston is a very diverse city. There's, like, the demographics of ETHS are a lot more diverse than you'll see in cities and high schools further north.
And yet,
But as I've like grown up here, I've noticed I've become more and more aware of how segregated friend groups are and how segregated the people you interact with on a daily basis. How and I mean this has something to do with what you were talking about earlier with how housing laws and housing districts that were set up long ago, hundreds of years ago, that have sort of the people you grow up who are around you in the same neighborhood as you, they tend to be the people you grow up with as friends. And I was wondering, how do you change this? How do you not...
is the housing in Evanston integrated?
Sorry?
Is the housing in Evanston integrated?
Oh,
That's your answer.
sorry.
That's
sorry.
your answer.
But
I'm not
how
even
do-
being flipped. Like that's your answer.
Sorry. How does it happen that if I go to lunch and I sit down at a table, that it's not a table with a group of white friends and a table right next to a table with a group of black friends who coexist peacefully but in two separate worlds? Like, how do I change that?
Well, I think the first thing is you recognize the limits of your power. You won't change that. And that's important to say. I'm not trying to like step on your dreams. I'm trying not to, shovel a load of bull, your way. I think what you have to do is decide what you want out of your life. I don't really like, I came up in a very, very different way. I'm from West Baltimore. I came up in the 80s in a period of intense violence. People think it's bad in Chicago now, and it is. But believe it or not, it used to be a lot worse. I mean, literally, like you could look at statistics, it was worse. That was like the cauldron that made me and shaped my expectations, of the world. There was so much violence around me. I guess I never had the expectation that I myself alone could stop it. I had something else. I had two things. The first thing was I wanted the tools to fight it. I didn't want to have to take it laying down. You know what I mean? Like if this was the way the world was going to be, I wanted to be a part of the fight. And that's why I write. I get tremendous exhilaration out of actually being, a part of the fight. But the second thing is I think there's something to be said for your own morality, okay? What I always, how I always think about myself and measure myself is even if the world is headed over the cliff and there's nothing I can do about it, I think that there's something like in saying, I'm not part of the group that's pushing it over the cliff. I'm part of the group that's trying to stop it. That's how I sleep at night. Do you know what I mean? And like that's like how I think. I think about what do I need ethically and morally to be able to sleep at night. And if this fight is going on and I'm not part of it, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. That's the premise of my entire interaction, with the world. Who can tell what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm wrong. Maybe you will stop it. Maybe you actually will. Who can tell? Do you know what I mean? Who can tell? I don't think you will, but you might. I've been wrong before. You know what I mean? You might well. I didn't think it was going to be a black president either, see? What you get for listening to me. But the bigger point is principle. The bigger point, what is the thing, like, I try to ground my actions not in, how the world will react, but in the things that I can actually control. And so I would throw that question back at you. Are you comfortable existing in that space? Where do you sit, at lunchtime? And are you comfortable with your own seating arrangement? That really is the first step. You know what I mean? Like you have to, ask yourself, how do I want to exist within the struggle?
Ta-Nehisi right here.
Okay. Hi, my name's Neali. I'm a senior at THS. I just applied to Howard, so
Oh, okay.
I'm in. Last year, everyone that took AP Lang and Comp as juniors had to read the summer assignment. Our summer assignment was Between the World and Me. And in the first week of class, we started unpacking and reading it. And a lot of us kind of stopped here, and it took a while to digest what you meant by this. So I was hoping you could just elaborate on when you say race is the child of racism, not the father. And the process of naming the people has never been a matter of genealogy and physiom. I don't know how to say that word. So much as one is hierarchy. But yeah, and it also got mentioned in my world and ethnic literature class this year too. So I was hoping you can just expound on that and basically explain what you mean by that.
What did you take that to mean?
Huh?
What did you when you heard that race is the child of racism, not the father? What did you take that to mean? I'm not trying. I kind of am putting you on the spot, but I'm actually. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm actually interested in how it came across to a high school student.
I think it was just because race is this social construct that white people have made.
Right.
So I think what you're saying by that is that it's something that was created before, so that our race had to come after, race had to come after that.
Yes.
So it's
Yes. That's exactly it.
Oh.
That's exactly it. You see, sometimes you get put on the spot and you're ready, see? Now you're ready. Again, I mean, it goes back to, just to expound on that wonderful, answer that you gave. It goes back to the notion that the way we are trained in this society is to believe that there are discrete races. For reasons of biology or divinity or whatever, there is some pure descended race that comes from Africa, and there's a pure descended race that comes from Europe, and there's something that you can purely refer to as the Asian race, and increasingly there's a Latino and Hispanic race, and there's a Native American race. This becomes laughable when you subject it to the test of history and the test of geography. Okay, I'm sitting here in Evanston. I'm black, happy, proud to be black. But I recognize that if I were born in Brazil and had the same features that I have right now, I might check some other box. They got 40 odd boxes that you can check in Brazil. You understand? If I were born in Louisiana 200 years ago, somebody might call me something different than what they call me now. This becomes absurd when people say, for instance, as is a common thought, hopefully less common, that, for instance, the way to end racism is for everybody to marry and to produce a race of beige people. But we are that race of beige people. They're black. We already did that. That's what actually happened. That's what black people are. I mean, and if you study the history of it, it becomes, not through marriage, by the way, but through mass rape. We are the beige. The line can always be moved. Anybody that's been to an African-American family reunion understands that the very definition of African-American is a quote-unquote mixed identity, as much as such a thing can actually exist. It already is a multiracial identity to begin with, and yet we're still black. You understand? The line can be moved. And the line is subject to power. It's not subject to some, pure sort of, DNA test or biology or anything. It has, nothing directly, to do with that. The same is true for white people. There's a history, in this, country of immigration. And if you look at 19th century America, there's a period in time where Irish people are not considered to be white. Italian people not considered to be white. Jews have to negotiate, their whiteness. This should be very, very instructive to you. Because what people say today, for instance, is, well, America is increasingly majority minority, as though that's a fixed thing. As though that can't be adjusted. As though that can't be tinkered with, as though it wasn't tinkered with before. It can always be tinkered with and adjusted. Beyond that, who has access, even if it is majority minority, who has access and who has electoral power within the political system is being tinkered with right now and can be. So you have to recognize that this haunts our vocabulary. The idea of there's no such thing as racial segregation, which presumes the idea that there's a such thing as race. No, there's racism, which segregates. There's racist segregation. Do you understand? The thing is done. It's not because of who you are. It's not because you were born black. It's because somebody decided you were a nigger. Those are two different things. It's not because you were born a certain way. There's nothing wrong with you, except that somebody decided that they wanted to plunder people who looked like you. That's the only thing wrong. And so I think, like, what motivates between the world and me, and why I repeatedly use that phrase, the people who call themselves white, people who think they are white, the people who, whatever, you know what I mean, who do the action of becoming white, is to understand that it's an action. It's not a state. It's an action.
Okay, we're gonna take a total of 2 more questions. We're gonna take that gentleman's question up front and this nice lady's question back here, and then that'll be it. Go ahead.
So last year in sophomore year, I lived in the south side of Chicago, right? The hood, 90th Street, and I realized that there's a different community of those type of black people and the black people who actually have the opportunity to live in mixed races. And I realized that, like in your book, that fear that the generation passed down, like that poison you were talking about, like how racism, there's a poison. With fear, there's a poison, right? I see black people being scared of black people, right? It's like the media today portrays the black man. You don't see him as a common man, right? You always have some sort of alert every time a black man with dreads comes walking behind you with sag pants or J's on. I've seen, this is a culture in the south side of Chicago with people banging buckets and people with sag pants and people who dress in colors. But it's also like there's lost people too, people who are angry or confused, or they're so engulfed in ignorance that when you try to bring them out of their ignorance by trying to tell them to be proud of who they are, they get angry at you because they won't accept the fact that they are beautiful. I've tried to convince people like that all the time, that being nappy is good, but every time you try to have dreadlocks, or every time that it's like you try to do your own thing, they make fun of you for that. And my question to you is, the black community Southside being so lost, is there a way that someone could wake them up, save those people?
Well, I probably would reject the premise. I don't think they're lost. I say that as you got to be careful. You cannot assume that because people are oppressed that they're ignorant. It's important. I mean, I grew up in a community that probably more resembles the west side of Chicago, I guess, than, South Side's big, but probably, more resembles like a Lawndale or something like that. I don't think it was anything wrong, again, with the people I grew up around. And so I would hazard to guess that there's nothing wrong with the people that you're talking about living on the south side. They probably know pretty well that they're beautiful. They probably know, pretty well exactly what's happening to them. They may not have the vocabulary for it. They may not, be able to express it, but, I'm a journalist, man. And so my job, and even though I write in this really aggressive manner, most of what I'm getting, I'm actually taking from other people and then feeding it back out. It's not mine. It's not my wisdom. Again, I think about, walking into, when I was doing the case for reparations, walking into Clyde Ross's home. And, first question I asked him was where he was from. He said Clarksdale, Mississippi. And the next question I asked him was, well, why'd you move to Chicago? And he said, I was seeking the protection of the law. And I said, what is the law in Mississippi? What do you mean? He said, well, police was white, district attorney and prosecutors were white, judges were white, all the political officials were white. That's no law. And I instantly understood what he was saying. The name law means nothing. If he didn't have law, then there was no law. That was profound. I never would have thought of that on my own. I hadn't lived 90 years, you know what I mean? I hadn't had the experiences that he had. And so, I always find, like, as a journalist, you really got to take people where they are. You should And when I say you should, I'm talking about myself. The lessons I tell myself. I'm the student, man. I'm the student. I find it that folks who are living under the boot often know a lot more about the boot than, folks who are, observing it from the outside.
Okay, and our last question for tonight.
Make
Hi.
it good. Better be
All
good.
right.
A lot of pressure right now. A lot of pressure.
Well,
Are you up to it? You sure? You
I'm
sure?
Okay.
You can quit.
Well, first I want to thank you for just keeping it real, because I appreciate that. But I'm a grad student, and I teach a course on race, gender, and intersectional theory at Notre Dame. And so this is a two-part question, because I'm also a comic fan. So I wondered, in reading some of the critiques of your work as being a male-centric view of the Black experience, I wondered kind of what your response was to that and how you incorporate or plan to incorporate intersectionality into your work. And then secondly, I wondered if you can tell us anything at all about what you're gonna write about our favorite goddess and queen, Aurora Monroe, since you will be writing Storm soon, so.
Do you read the Black Panther comic right now?
Yes.
Do you see it in the comic book? Do you see any answers to your questions in the comic book?
To a degree. I mean, I'm an academic, so of course I critique. I feel like nuance is always something that can be added. So I just wondered what you had plans for.
The work is Black male-centered. I have to write from here. I have to write from the space of what I am. I can't try to, represent more than I think the power of the work comes from that. It comes from me, sitting in this place here and saying, this is, what I am. I think, well, I'll tell you this. I wrote a book, Beautiful Struggle, it was published in 2008, okay? I think the subtitle is literally Father, Two Sons, and something else. I can't remember what it is. Sorry. It's all dudes. I mean, if you think Between the World and Me is dudes, this book is all dudes. It's all about, it really is. That is it was written consciously as a male-centered book. No one asked me at all about representation, in that book. No one asked me about intersectionality when that book came out. I think that's because very few people actually read that book. The first reading I did for that book, it was like 5 people there. My dad was one of the people, and my wife was there. And nobody cared. I'm not saying that to say that the question is irrelevant. What I'm saying is that something happened Between the World and Me, wherein an inordinate, as far as I'm concerned, an unhealthy amount of weight was put on that book to represent a diverse and incredible experience. Between the World and Me can't represent the LGBT experience. It can't represent the experience of being, Black and disabled in this country. It is limited in what it has to say specifically about Black poverty in this country. It is extremely limited about what it has to say about the strange place, it must be to actually be Black and be wealthy and still be, on some sort of second-class tier. And it's limited in what it has to say about the Black female or the Black woman's experience in this country, experience of Black women and Black girls. I think the problem, and it's just what I believe, is not Between the World and Me. I think the problem is that there aren't more books like Between the World and Me. I think the response says more about the publishing industry as it is than it does about the book. I think, and I'm speaking about this not just as, author but in its position, as much as you try to resist people putting a crown on your head, people want kings and queens. They want you to represent everybody. You can tell them over and over again, that's not what I am. That's not what I'm doing. That's not why I came. I'm very happy that, you guys are reading and you're paying, but you cannot look to me to answer for 40 million people. That's not what I've ever done. And they'll ask you to do it anyway. They'll ask you to do it anyway. I can't bear that weight. I just can't. It's not, and I don't even think it's for me. You know what I mean? It feels artifice to say, to take in that critique and say, okay, the next thing I write, I will make sure to represent black women in a certain way. Because that feels like I'm actually, in a sense, almost pandering. Like I'm trying to get you to not criticize me or attack me for something that I did. I think my energy would be better spent doing all I can to make sure that, when the microphone is offered to me to answer for things that I know are not my experience, I make sure that they're black women who are writing around me who I hand that microphone to. I think that's much more important. And so, I work hard to do that. It was important to me that Roxanne, you're a comic book fan. It was important to me that Roxanne, wrote World of Wakanda. That was important to me. I asked her to do that. It was important to me that Yona, wrote Black Panther and the crew, with me. It's important that I, recognize, my I guess official genius now friend, Nicole Hannah-Jones. You know what I mean? It's important to me that I shout that out. It's important to me that I talk to you, about the writers that inform me, that I talk to you about Zora Neale Hurston, that I talk to you about the Volia Glimp, that I talk to you about, all the, when and where I enter, you know what I mean? A Sword Among Lions, the biography of Ida B. Wells, that I talk to you about that, but I can't be that. That's not me. That's not who I am, you know what I mean? And, if that comes up short, if that's not intersectional enough, then I'll just have to carry that. I would much rather carry that than carry the artifice, and try to, dance and be something else.
Excellent work. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Thank you so much. Okay, I hope some of you can stay for the conversation in the auditorium that's going to happen just in a few minutes. Thank you so much for those who need to go. Thank you for coming.
So, who was blown away by that tonight? I think what would be helpful with respect to this conversation tonight is for us to think about how we want to frame the conversation and what we want to get out of the conversation. So I think it was really, it hit me really hard that he was talking about America based on the foundation of a myth, and that the real truth is that it was based on and is based on white supremacy. And I think a lot of people have had a lot of hard or trouble wrapping their heads around even saying the words white supremacy. And in the book, he talks about how calling someone a racist or behavior as racist is actually seen as a slur rather than a fact. And so I think if we come at it from that kind of place of being curious about telling the truth and being able to see and frame things within this perspective of white supremacy, I think our discussion will be really fruitful. Is that okay with everybody? So how do you want to start? Do you want to start with questions or you want to give your observations?
I was going to start with a question for Marcus. You just had this conversation with him. I thought it was fantastic. Did you get what you wanted to get? Was there a question that you wanted to get to but you couldn't get to? How was it?
Well, I definitely over-prepared, right? So I wanted to make sure, though, that we kind of covered some of his earlier pieces and dealt with some of the more recent stuff. He kind of navigated the way that he felt most comfortable, but I was prepared for the case for reparations, first white president. So I think, get a chance to ask what I wanted to ask, although I did not get to the Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. I didn't get to that, but you know, it was still, you know, I think a fruitful conversation.
We can talk about taking a knee tonight. I know our students here at ETHS have been very courageous and brave, standing with Colin Kaepernick and solidarity with respect to that. So, yeah, I think we can talk about that tonight.
How many of you have read the book? I know the book is pretty new, so, or read some of the essays in the book? Yeah. For me, the whole takeaway of the book was just his honesty, his truth-telling. He called it compromising the comfortable narrative. And it made me think of him talking about America as this great experiment. And I was just wondering, I've only been here 3 years. What do you think the narrative of Evanston is? What's this Evanston experience? Anybody got an answer to that question? I'm going to jump in. Yep. I saw your hand up.
Ooh. I guess people like to say that Evanston is so diverse, and that's why we're here. I moved to Evanston because it's so diverse, but really, I'm gonna sit and work and do everything with people who look like me, act like me, and are at the same income level as me.
So I'm Stephen Spite. I actually teach here at the high school. The comfortable narrative of this high school is, yes, it's diverse. Yes, we've done our work on equity. Yes, we are moving and changing things. But underneath that comfortable narrative is some hard truths. The hard truth is that we accelerate the gap between achievement of white students and non-white students. That is, we accelerate the growth that white students show. Yes, we have growth with non-white students, but it's not the same rate of growth. The uncomfortable narrative is that there is an embedded, very strong, silently but loudly speaking group of mostly white parents in this community who do not want our equity work to continue forward. That part of the pushback of saying, well, let's have mixed ability classes. But in order to make sure when those kids come into the classes that our standards stay safe, we have to have high stakes testing. Because we don't trust the ability of those kids to bring down the level of achievement for my student. Okay, so diversity is nice from the outside, but then when it's you sitting in the classroom with me, I don't trust your humanity enough to be up to my level. That's the uncomfortable part of being at Evanston Township High School. As a teacher of 26 years who still to this day in parent-teacher conferences talking about how do we know that you actually know what you're talking about in teaching. Now there's code words. It's not said like that, but it's code of how's the math gonna work out for my kid? They're taking AP, they should get an A. No, it means you're up to a challenge. You may not get an A in AP. Shocking. Okay, but that's sort of the uncomfortable truth about Evanston. It's a great place, but underneath that great place is some hard truths.
So what I hear, you said spite? Spite. So I want to say professor, but Professor Spite. So what I hear Professor Spite saying is that there's a disconnect between the ideas of diversity and the ideas of really is what happening here in Evanston and what we mean by diversity. And I think Ta-Nehisi Coates speaks to that in this book, that they're two very different things. And again, we want to look at behavior outside of the context. And the context always goes back to white supremacy and what that means, even here in Evanston. So, you want to say something?
I think I heard him say that he was being undermined in his abilities to try to change those things by a power structure that exists not only in this school, but in this town. This town is as segregated as South Africa, but it just has a really great PR machine that keeps the lie going. They've told the lie to themselves so long they believe it.
Yeah, yeah. This is Lonnie, a long time. What are you, fifth, sixth generation Evanstonian? Fifth. So that's the thing that I learned about Evanston, that it's a generational place, and if you're not, what, fourth or fifth generation, you aren't a real Evanstonian. Is that true?
I've got a comment over here.
Okay.
Hi, I grew up in Evanston. I've been here since I was 7 years old. I was probably a part of the first group that was bused to Timber Ridge and Skokie. So I went to school with predominantly Jewish kids. I feel my upbringing was great. I feel actually privileged now that I have a better view of the world and what was going on, even though my dad was working class, and I'm the youngest of 8. What I see, the reality of Evanston being right now, is there's a carefully constructed, systematic racism that's going on. And there's a great racial disparity and divide. A lot of that is current is due to the new influx of people coming around from other states. Like, I don't want to be offensive to anyone, but this is true. Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, South Carolina, Tennessee, things like that. A lot of those people in Wisconsin did not go to school with mixed races. And while I think America is built on immigrants, it's my belief that corporate America is guilty of dumbing down America by passing over qualified Americans of all races, saying that they can't find anyone who has the capabilities that these people that they have to bring in have. I don't think that's true. And I just have one comment about Northwestern. While Evanston is considered a welcoming city, I don't think blacks are as welcome as Asians and Indians and other races. Blacks do not appear to be welcome on campus because we're actually being arrested for criminal trespass there. Even though I'm a former student, even though I was currently listed as a temp in their temp pool, I was arrested. Now that's surprising to me that something like that could happen in Evanston, but it does. And lastly, what I want to say is due to the downturn of the economy, I think we've been pushed back to prior to the civil rights days because everybody was, who was in power was giving jobs to their friends and families and people like them. And if you were black, you were left out in the cold. So that's all I have to say. I loved growing up in Evanston. It was a great place. I had a great education, but I feel like the progress that we made has been pushed back on purpose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I think some people would probably, I like how Ta-Nehisi says that he takes issue. He often says, I take issue with that. Do we have a mythology of how great Evanston was? Is that a myth? Was Evanston really as great as it thinks it was? Or, and I'm being serious. I think I would say that, what's true of the country is true in Evanston too. That there are people here who have lived a certain way because they're living in another world, they're living in another Evanston, and that those who are struggling have been struggling all along. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we have to reconcile if we're really going to do the things that we say we want to see here in Evanston, especially in the high school and especially in District 65, right? We have equity initiatives that are not really being implemented and not really readily acceptable, and we haven't really told the truth about that, and we're not really doing the work that we need to do. So.
We have a question here. Okay, after you guys.
Uh, oh. So what I want to say is, since being an ETHS student, I've lived here 16 years, almost practically all my life, is that my experience here is one of a Latino student, a student that has been like most people think that because of my brown skin, I am Mexican ethnicity, and they say, oh, you're from Mexico, and you know about the tortadas or anything like that. But in actuality, I've never gone to Mexico. None of my parents are from there either. And what this statement is really coming towards is like, Evanston to me is, we don't really speak of like a lot about other people's history. For example, like the native history of Evanston and just the native people in general, because most people don't know that John Evans, the person that Evanston is named after, slaughtered thousands of Native Americans. What? Yeah. So history like that we don't ever talk about, even though that we say that Evanston is diverse, we say that we know a lot about what is actually going on, but in actuality we don't know anything about our history and about our actual past, and we just decide to ignore that in most of our history classes also, which I think is probably important that we need to address. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Hey, I graduated from this high school in 1985, and yes, go kids. My experience at Evanston, I mean, I respect the sister who she asked a question to the brother, and she asked a question about how do I change the situation when when all of my classmates are sitting in different tables and stuff, and I like the speaker's response when he said, "How comfortable are you in your skin?" And my experience was pretty much as an African American person, was pretty much I was diverse. I had a lot of friends. I sit in different when we had Beardsley and Boltwood. The Michael School cafeteria, and I was going I was like a bee to every flower, sitting in all of the different cafeterias, and I pretty much got around. I played all 3 different sports: lacrosse, wrestling, and soccer, and all of my experiences were very, very diverse. I think I took advantage with all of the different cultures. I think I was pretty comfortable within my own skin. My main thing was I didn't succumb to the stereotypes, I saw a lot of stereotypes, like the these, those, and thems. I didn't, my mom was real proud of the fact that she brought me up as a person who did not succumb to, I grew up in the South Side. She moved us out of the South Side, moved me up in the North Side, and she was an educated, person herself, and got me into speaking proper English and everything like that, being proud to be educated and all like that, and not being afraid to meeting different people from different cultures and stuff. And we brought our own son into being the same way. Now our son, he has his own business with Chore Bug and everything like that. And so I think being, I respected that one sister who said, who asked if she, how can she change? I think the way is just to be a kind of person who is comfortable in your own skin, and being not afraid to glide around to the many different cultures of people, and take advantage of the of the diversity that Evanston does have. You know what I'm
I
saying?
hear what you're saying. I definitely hear and understand what you're saying about being comfortable in your own skin and making yourself available to other cultures. But it sounded to me a little bit like you were verging on the tip of what Dr. Campbell and Ta-Nehisi were talking about with the politics of respectability. And I just get real nervous when people start talking like that. I think there is beauty in everyone's culture, and there's a specific culture that has been cultivated, having been enslaved and survived slavery here in America, and there's beauty and wonder in that, and saying these and this. I mean, you know, wasn't it Lorraine Hansberry who wrote in that vernacular, especially? And that was true to our culture, and there shouldn't be shame attached to that. There shouldn't have, but there is because of white supremacy, not because there's inherent disrespect in assuming that stereotype. You are black, but you're not a nigger. That's what Ta-Nehisi said. Somebody else decided that that was being niggerish, and so that's unacceptable. That's not respectable behavior. And so I think we have to be really cautious when we start talking about, I'm acting this way so I will be more acceptable to other people. Does that make sense? So one of the things I want to throw out there, and I don't want us to miss talking about, is I thought it was really interesting when Ta-Nehisi said, why haven't white people saved themselves? I really want to touch on that, because after all of these talks, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this talk back, every time in the audience, there's white people who stand up and say, what can I do? How do I fix this? What can I do in my own life? So I'm curious how that question sat with white folks in the audience. And I know I may be putting you on the spot, but you know, it's out there, and I'd like for us to discuss that.
Hi, I'm a senior at ETHS this year, and I'm actually going to touch on something that young man, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, but who's also an ETHS student, was talking about with history in Evanston and how we've been neglecting to recognize that, or at least I have been. Today in my senior studies class, we learned about the housing situation within Evanston and its history, and we learned about foster school. And with that, just so many people in my class were just so surprised about what were happening. We were so angry, but just in 2012, this is when the referendum happened, and my teachers were showing us the places that voted against having foster school come back, and they were all predominantly white places. So this is something new that I'm learning right now. But we see Evanston as such a diverse, progressive place, but I just want to remind those who don't know of the history to learn about the history, because like everywhere else in the United States, mostly, we are 10 years behind when they told us schools needed to be segregated, desegregated, excuse me. And we got rid of foster school, this community school. We did bus people. These are all things that are in our history, and in no way are we progressive in that. It's all recent, and still these things are going on that happened just in 2012. So speaking, I guess, on how I felt when I saw the girl ask, what can I do as a white person? I think what I'm trying to do is educate myself, because today I learned that I knew nothing about Evanston history and how non-progressive we were. And it's not an excuse. We have these resources, and I feel like we need to just educate ourselves, because too much of the problems are happening out of ignorance. So yeah.
Thank you. We got a question back there.
So, I'll do my best to answer this question you brought up, and I appreciate you asking. I would say that I was thinking about the comment that a a gentleman made as a question about saving people. And I started thinking about my own journey that has an immense amount of ignorance in it, and that ignorance that with time goes away. And I think the greatest lesson that I've had as a white person is that this work is about saving myself. That I think that I deeply believe the interconnection of all humans, and that the more that I'm able to develop genuine, honest relationships with other people where I hear others' genuine stories and embrace their humanity as they are, I grow. And I think part of your original question about the narrative of Evanston, I think part of it is this feel-good sense, and I'll speak from a white perspective, a feel-good sense of, oh, I live in diversity. I moved here because of the diversity, and I feel good that I'm doing that. But when it disrupts me and my access to the world, I begin to shove away and say, no, not, I didn't mean like that. And, but I find that, no, I do mean it like that. Like, that's the real human engagement. And I think that to sustain racial equity work as a white person is to understand that it's actually a selfish act. That as a white person, I grow in my understanding of humanity and myself, and I grow. And I think that any white person that isn't able to explore in that isn't, well, I think there's a lot of downsides of that. I think it can't be sustained. I think it's not genuine. I think it has a lot of very negative implications despite good intentions. So that's part of what I'd offer to your question.
Appreciate your comments. Is somebody over there?
I have a question here, but I wanted to say something about the idea of actively doing something. This young woman who said she's just learning, learning her history. It seems like a passive thing, but it really is an active thing. Ta-Nehisi talked about, going over this cliff and trying to be a part of stopping it. So the ball, because of history, the ball is already rolling. We're already rolling off the cliff. So to do nothing is to allow to go off the cliff. You have to actively do something, even if it's as small as learning something, speaking up, but just sitting and doing nothing is allowing the flow of history to continue in a kind of downward motion. So kind of anything is something. I will say that.
Here's another perspective.
I just wanted to add, it kind of plays on what you were saying here, but I think as white people, we also have to be willing to call one another out. It was very disturbing to me how many people left. It's a little bit of a go to church on Sunday, but what does your life look like Monday through Saturday? FAN brings in amazing speakers, and I think it's very, very comfortable for Evanstonians and other North Shore people to come and to listen, and that's the church on Sunday, and yeah, I went and I read that diverse book, and I went to that talk, but they don't stay and have the difficult conversations.
Amen.
I'd like to add a different perspective. I was born here. My family has 7 generations here. I was raised at Milburn and Sheridan on an estate. And prior to going to school, my father had to go to the superintendent because my sister and brother and I were not allowed to go to Orrington, which was just across Sheridan Road. We had to go to Noyes. So Evanston has always had, and the reason we had to go to Noyes because we were children of a servant. My father was the groundskeeper, and my mother worked on Dodge and Simpson, the building that they're talking about now, that was a grocery store. She was the grocery clerk in that store. Evanston has always kind of kept things undercover. You never read or heard anything about Evanston in the media, that's the radio and the news media, prior to the late 60s, and of course once the civil rights came about, then you could read some things about Evanston, but prior to that you didn't. If I went over into Chicago to visit people in Chicago that didn't know me and I said I was from Evanston, they'd say, "Where is that?" Because they'd never heard of it. Here in the school system, one other thing. Family Focus was Foster School when I was when I was in the elementary school age bracket. However, when we finally got what we called integration, they sent the black kids to the white schools, but the white kids didn't come to the black school. Consequently, Foster is now Family Focus instead of an integrated school. And that's because it was in the black neighborhood. So there's a lot that goes on undercover that you don't know about unless you're here. Northwestern had a quota system for the number of blacks that they would take. You could get into Garrett, but in any of the other departments, maybe you could get into them, maybe you couldn't. And there were numbers that they had as to how many blacks they allowed. I won't quote them because I don't know how accurate they are. But I do know that it wasn't until the 60s that blacks came to Northwestern in numbers. And that's when things begin to change. And I know I'm taking a long time, so that's all I'll say right now, but I've been here a long time, so I can give you some more information if you want it.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, do we understand, I don't know how many people are from Evanston, that that's still how Evanston works? There's elementary schools for each of the 9 wards in Evanston, but the 5th ward, which is the predominantly black ward, is the only one that does not have an elementary school. So therefore, those kids go to the other schools, and that's one of the reasons why Evanston is so diverse.
And that family focus.
They don't have a neighborhood school, the kids in that ward.
That family focus is in danger of being displaced, and the building that family focus is in danger. So that's something that a lot of people don't know about. So if you're thinking again, what can you do here in Evanston? You can talk to Colette, I can't remember her last name, who's the head of Family Focus, on how you can help and how you can help secure the space of Foster, where Family Focus is. And Robin Simmons, you can reach out to the 5th Ward alderperson. It's a long story, Yvette, but inquire after, yeah.
Thank you. The discussion after the discussion is really where we need to sit, right? It's the uncomfortable space for us to sit in. I'm upping the ante. Like, I'm actually looking at the intention behind diversity. If the intention behind diversity is for someone to be someone else's savior, I don't need it. I don't need it. But if the intention behind the diversity is for us to be allies, bringing everyone to the table, then that's diversity. So I want to question the intention when we talk about diversity, because now that's the new word that's thrown around. And I'm not okay with the word unless there's an intention behind that word that's authentic and real. And the intention should be that we are allies at the table. And that when one of us is at the table, we're bringing 10 others that don't look like us, speak like us, talk like us, pray like us, or have the history of us at that table. Then we're allies.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 more comments before we wrap things up. It went really fast tonight.
Hi. So I grew up in Evanston, went to Evanston Township. I was part of a racial experiment, as they called it, at Foster School. My brother and I in first and second grade. I grew up very close to Evanston Township. I grew up in, it's very cliche to say didn't see color, but I didn't. That was my family, that was my block, that was my neighborhood. So when I went to this experimental thing at Foster, I could not, basically they switched. All the white kids were treated like black kids, and all the black kids were treated like white kids, and it was not a good experiment. I don't think it was useful because I never understood the purpose. I don't think the kids were told the purpose. I didn't understand what the problem was because I didn't have that problem. Now I'm speaking as a white woman, of course, but so meaning when I was a kid in Evanston, I thought it was a lot more comfortable in Evanston than it is now, actually, and I've come back to Evanston as an adult many years later. I think it's less comfortable now in Evanston. I think our diversity is BS, basically. I don't think we are a diverse community the way we were when I was a kid, and that was 50-some years ago. So just my thought on that. But I was part of this experimental situation at Foster 50-some years ago.
Well, I think we need to hear more about that after this, because that sounds like a really problematic experiment.
It was again,
I
never understood the issue.
Just so we can fit people in.
Yeah, but Maggie, you want one? Yeah.
Hey, Ben, up here. Right here, Ben.
Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I've been living in Evanston for 30 plus years. I'm originally from Jamaica. And about 20 years ago, after we bought a house, we had kind of a lot of visitors from the block that came to see us, and some of them actually wanted to know how many people were going to live in our house and who they were. And we were like, that was kind of weird. But coming from Jamaica, and I look at diversity. The purpose of diversity is not for us to lose our identity to other people or for them to lose to us. I see diversity as able to create opportunities. That's what we want. A friend of mine who was in the 60s in the civil rights movement, she always said to me that one of the worst things that happened to black people in America is desegregation. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, but I think racism is systemic. It's not something that changes overnight. It becomes a part of you. I sub in the district and we were doing civil rights, and I asked 7th graders who believe that racism will one day end. And I was so hopeful that these young people would think that in their generation it would. And I had only maybe 2% who believe it will one day end. Most of them think it will not because they said it passed from generation to generation. So what I'm saying is that what black people need are opportunities. We need equal access to education. We need equal access to banking. We need equal access to housing. And those are where we are excluded. So the problem is deeper than diversity. It is the laws are the problem. We have African Americans that are locked up at a high rate for crimes that white folks would get a lower sentence. So we could sit here and I could imagine we talking another 200 years, our generation, talking about the same thing. But what we really need to do is to look at the laws that are on the book. That's where the problem, our big problem lies. Because these laws are discriminatory in their process. A lot of times we'll say blacks are not.
You know what?
Yes.
I really appreciate
Yes.
your comments, but we got to start to wrap things up.
Okay.
So we're going to get one more question
Thank
up
you.
here, and I think there was somebody over here too. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make a quick comment, well, condensed comment, as quick as possible. I grew up in Inglewood on the south side. I grew up in a very violent time, which was the 80s, with the drug dealing. Probably the same time the young man who spoke today grew up. And I've seen also from that tragedy, I've seen a beautiful awakening happen also. In saying that, I'm saying that with the diversity in Evanston, I lived in New York, I grew up around a lot of people that you see, Common Sense, Kanye, and what I'm seeing right now is that even though we make comments about what we expect everyone else to do for us, and I've seen diversity in your city council here recently, there has to be accountability for our problems by our own people. I grew up in Chatham. My dad was an entrepreneur. Her dad was a gas station owner here. Black businesses in Chatham, black banks, black loans. If there's going to be change, it's going to come from us. It's not coming from anywhere else. When they reversed Brown versus Board of Education, we had no say-so in it. Until we decide that we are going to stand up for ourselves, there will be no change.
Last comment.
I'm gonna up your ante a little bit. That I don't think we need diversity. I think we need equity. We asked the question of why white people don't save ourselves, and I think Ta-Nehisi mentioned this in one of his articles, that as a collective, we don't save ourselves because we're benefiting from it. And the fact is that we wrote racism into law, and I think we need to write equity into the law. And I think we see a lot of young minds here from Evanston, and I'm going to pose a question that obviously can't be answered tonight because we're running out of time. But for the leaders of our education system, or particularly Evanston High School, what policies and procedures that you guys can put in place to create racial equity within your institutions within a larger system?
Thank you.
Last comment.
Marcus asked me to let you know about a text I got from Ta-Nehisi and his agent who is here from Penguin Random House. He said on the entire tour, this was the most extraordinary experience that he had. Best interview, best audience, best Q&A. He says, I know, isn't that great? And he says, gonna come back. So, fabulous. Thanks to all of you for coming out and staying. Thanks for coming to fan programming. We appreciate it. I actually am a strong believer that that coming together as a community and talking and listening and learning is actually hugely significant. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. So I appreciate the time and energy that Evanstonians put into coming into this building. Thank you so much, everybody. Love you. Have a good night.
Thank you.